YouTube, Awesome Rider here. Welcome to my series review for Kamen Rider Revice. I know, this seems super late and out of touch, but as you know, I kind of took a break from Rider at the end of Saber, got back into Geats, caught up with it, and after I caught up with it to watch live, I was still on a Rider kick. Thank you. So I caught up on Revice, and I've been putting together a series review slowly, so we're gonna get started. First of all, I want to thank everybody that left comments about this. I did put a community post up asking for your thoughts on the series like I did with Geats, as it's something I want to do for future series reviews, and I appreciate everybody that participated. I will be reading those at the end, right before the final verdict. If I don't read yours, I apologize, but I obviously can't read everybody's, but I did read everybody's, to myself, so thank you. But we're gonna go ahead and get started because I want to try to keep it as concise as possible, but it's probably gonna be a long one, so buckle in, or fast forward, or both. So, to start off superficial, I wanted to talk about the suits and the gimmick and stuff and say, I overall really did like the suits in this series. It had a great ecosystem of suits. A lot of the suits, especially Revice's power-ups, felt that they were one click away from being I just love this. It's on paper I should be loving this more, but I did like them. It was just this weird thing where it's one click away from loving it. But I generally like the suits. I love Revice's base suit. In general, the idea of the contrast of the mean demon-looking vibe with the pink light blue is really cool, and I like that they let it look so mean for a demon series. Vice has this kind of adorable, almost hoodie looking thing. I think possibly my favorite thing was the ability forms that were based off of a creature and a past rider because it was an anniversary series. I think it was one of the least intrusive anniversary series aspects, and I think they were very well designed, to the point where, if you were to have someone watch or see stuff from this and Geo, you would clearly know Geo something was up. But with this, you wouldn't even know they're based on a past rider unless you'd seen the series. And I like that they balanced it where I think because maybe they spent so much time designing these, they seeded using those forms all throughout the series. In general, outside of a couple oh my god, the Jack Vice or whatever, they kind of balanced using all the forms throughout the series pretty well, and I really liked those. I liked the live suit a lot. It's funny, when he first got his power-up, I'm I like Holy Live, but there's something missing, and then when he got the final one, I'm yes, this is clicking. I loved Veil's suit, the sort of rustic prototype-looking suit vibe of it. Aguilera's suit was really unique. John's suit grew on me. It always felt out of place. It looked like it belonged in Kamen Rider Ghost or something, but in general, I just really liked the suits. I really did like the concept of the gimmick, and there was a lot of stuff I liked about it. I did feel it got really clunky, and it wasn't as, I don't think unique as some of the ones from Saber and stuff. Yeah, a little bit clunky, and the sing-songiness of the belt definitely got on my nerves. It got, way loud, especially when they would all transform. It was loud both visually and, audio-wise in terms of everything going on. Now that that's out of the way, we're gonna kind of start with positives and go into mixed aspects. I'm not even gonna say there was any outright negative, not in the sense that the series was perfect, but a lot of my negative points are kind of married to a positive, if that makes any sense. That's why it's more mixed. But in general, I would say it has some really strong stuff to it. Some of the stronger points is, I think the mythology was really well thought out. A lot of the times in Toku, sometimes they'll drop off, or the mythology won't be explained, or it'll be messy, or they'll explain it with your powers come from Earth's hope, or some nonsense, or Earth smiles, Protect smiles. I'm God, Toku nonsense. But I thought the mythology was well thought out and well explained, and by the time you got to a certain point of the series, there wasn't a whole lot of questions I had left, and that's kind of rare, and I like how well thought out that was. But probably the two most strongest aspects of the series for me was the family dynamics and the themes. The family dynamic and chemistry between the core family was some of the best I've ever seen. They truly felt like a family, both in the good times and the bad times. And I like that they set that up early, before all the drama started. In the early episodes, you just had these nice scenes, would often book in an episode at the bathhouse of them having dinner together, or when the mom got attacked early when she was in the hospital, they had some nice scenes there. So it didn't immediately throw you into the drama. It kind of showed you what the status quo was like for the family being happy, and so you got to see the good times and the bad, so that when they did argue, the tumultuous relationship between the brothers felt real, and that was really well done. It was truly the heart of the series. And also, the second thing I loved most was the themes about demons and, letting go of our demons and living with our demons. It was actually, if I'm being honest, pretty deep. I thought there was some really good life lessons in there, which can often happen in Toku and Rider, but this is maybe one of my favorite ones in Rider ever in terms of the way it was handled, as each character manifested their demons in different ways. The dad trying to, ignore his and fight it, and, I think Iki meant to represent the most healthy, which is working with it and then eventually overcoming it. John's being about, Sakura's being about, her insecurities and about her weakness. And then, of course, Evil and Live being, him repressing it and trying to not deal with it. I like that that was cool because it gave you a different dynamic for the show and could kind of play up to the dynamics of like evil versus live or the funness of Vice, but it also had like a deeper meaning about everyone's demons are different, and they had some great lessons in there about that I think were very well done, and I'll address that one more time when I talk about the ending, but that was definitely one of my favorite parts of the series. Now this is where we get into like mixed stuff in terms of like, again, there's like positives married to negatives. Like, to start, let's talk about the end. I felt like the very end of the series, the pacing was very weird. I saw a lot of people talking about that they felt it was jumbled and mixed, and here's the thing. I don't think it was bad. I think the delivery was mixed. I think that in general, most of the story beats they didn't feel out of place, just the delivery felt weird. Like, I remember around, I want to say the late 30s, it felt like we were winding down. Like, if I didn't know the episode count, I'd be like, we have like 4 episodes left, but we had like 12 or 13. It reminded me of the end of Build, where as much as I love Build, it was clear the writers were ready to be done, but they still had episodes left, so they had to tread water for a bit. So you kind of had that whole, it's not evil, it's final plan yet meme. And that's what it felt like. I'm like, God, this is weird. Are they going to tread water this whole time? And they didn't need to be, though, because then when it kicked into gear, they had more story to tell. And we hit this weird beat where every 3 episodes, it felt like we hit a finale, and I'm like, the series could end right here. But then they had more story to tell. And it always felt worth it to me. Like, okay, yeah, that was worth continuing the series. Like, that was valuable. But I think that the pacing of all that could have been handled much better and much smoother, so it didn't feel like a weird stop-start. Like, you know, you had the kind of ending with the final resolution of the stuff with Live and Evil, which that was a little bit mixed. There was some interesting stuff there about the main corporation guy, like wanting a family, and like it tied into the family theme, and Giff thinking that that was his family because they all had their DNA, but there was some mixed stuff in there, and people said like the Giff stuff felt anticlimactic, and I kind of agree, but I think everything that could have been done was done with him, and I think he just kind of served the purpose of a big bad. I think some of the aspects of like him seeing the Igarashis as his family could have been played with more, but yeah, the stuff with the brothers when it came to Evil and Live, he was definitely a little bit aggressive in terms of like they just wanted the plot of him being against it. He's like, I'm aggressively against you because the plot calls for it, and he was a bit unreasonable. But I think the resolution of that ultimately worked for me, about him realizing him trying to repress evil was the wrong thing to do. And that right there, when they resolved that and defeated Gift together, that felt like a right conclusion. And then you dug up the stuff with George and him, and the stuff with George was weird because they built up some stuff with his character and finding out that his dad put his demon attached to him. And I was going to say put his demon in him, but that sounded weird. And then I just said it, so it sounded weird again. But regardless, and it felt like if they didn't address it, it would feel dropped. So it felt like they're like, oh crap, we got to address this. And they shoehorned it in at the end, which made his motivations feel very sudden and cartoonish. So I would say the story didn't feel out of place in the grand scheme, but they could have paced it better. And then like the demon character that was actually his demon was weirdly put in the movie. So I think that could have been handled better, and I think it could have been handled better by cutting the cast. I think this series had way too big of a cast, and this is where it's kind of mixed, because I do have a compliment to say about that. Like, it's weird that Revice presented as a series that was going to be more dialed back compared to Saber, which was many writers, but it wound up having pretty much as many characters as Saber, and even though I think they had too many characters, I do think they handled the amount of characters they had better. Like, every single character that had some sort of prominence got a storyline. Even if it was, like, confusingly paced, like George's, every single person got a storyline, including, like, over demons. Whereas, like, with Saber, you had characters like, I forget Hazelnuts and Gretel's name, or even his writer name, that character, and Buster. You know, I liked Buster. He was a good guy. He was a good dad, but he didn't get any storyline. So there was, like, characters in Saber that literally got nothing outside of their base character description. But at least, even though I think there was too many characters, everybody in this that got focus got a storyline, beginning, middle, and end, at least in my opinion. But they definitely could have trimmed the cast. Like, I didn't like the Julio character at all after he was redeemed. He was really kind of annoying, to be honest. Like, I liked his redemption story, but then I think he could have just popped up every now and then, or left and showed up at the end. And then, like with Over Demons, his story with his dad, I can remember the dude's name. There was some nice beats in there, but I felt his and Julio's stories treaded on similar ground, where they were for different reasons, but they both had this storyline about wanting to be a writer and to prove that they could be a writer when people didn't believe in them. Again, different reasons, different characters, but it felt like we could have trimmed that down to one character. We didn't need them both to have that storyline. And I appreciated that with Over Demons, they tried to tie it to like a family dynamic with his dad, and that they wanted everything to be family related, but we just didn't need it. The cast was too big. The Igarashi family, George and his dad, and sort of the weird family stuff with Giff was plenty. You didn't need it. Again, everybody got focused, but you just didn't need it. I think that they could have trimmed some stuff down and allowed George's story to breathe better, or just fully admit you're not going to have time for it in this and put it all in a V-Cinema, because his V-Cinema was weird and we'll get to that later. Also, something I want to bring up is I did really like how the Iki photo stuff was foreshadowed like consistently throughout the series, but something that always bothered me is it didn't make sense that everybody else was seeing him disappear from photos Back to the Future style, because it was him losing his memories, so it would have made more sense if when he looked at the pictures, he didn't see himself. I had that in my notes and I didn't want to forget that. Something else that's kind of mixed is I feel the tones of the series were at odds sometimes. Like early on, it was clearly like a very classic modern writer show with a lot of just fun bits and goofiness, but also some serious storytelling. But as we got on and got into the backstory, it felt like the tones were at odds of trying to do this really fun, like funny bits with Vice and cartoony, almost Den-O antics, but then have these really like dark, brooding writer storyline and themes, and it felt like it wasn't gelling 100%. Like, I hate to whenever I talk about dark, mature stories in writer, because there's that whole annoying sect of like toku goobers that are like, oh, it's a dark series show for adults, put on HBO. Stop. But there is different tones in like different series. Some will be more mature, some will be more funny, and some of them balance it better. Like, for example, Gaim was a little bit of a more mature leaning series despite the fruit theme, but they also had a lot of quirkiness in there, but it felt like it was accounted for in a way that all gelled right. And like as the series went on, it just didn't gel right. And I think that the deeper we got into the more mature stories, the Vice antics would feel weirdly out of place. And that's another thing too, is I liked Vice fine. I think I liked him more at the very beginning, but I didn't like him as much near the end. Not that I disliked him, but I felt that they were really trying to make the next Den-O and Momotaros happen, and it just wasn't working for me. I think the dynamic worked for me as best it could, and definitely worked for me in the finale, but in terms of trying to make that happen, it just never clicked with me as much as you'd think. I will say that I really did like the ending. I thought the ending was really well done. Like, again, it's kind of choppy stop-start, but I like that the Iki memory stuff amounted to something, and I like the bittersweet endings and like unique endings, not because it always has to be a twist or something, but it makes it more unique and memorable. And part of me thought, like, you know, Iki actually losing his memory forever could have been an interesting sacrifice, because a lot of the main plot of was him always being selfless and never having time for himself, so this ultimately let him have time for himself. But I think when they went for a Vice sacrifice, it worked even better. And I saw a lot of like negative comments about the finale, but I really liked that it wasn't a generic fight against a big bad or another writer having an idiotic misunderstanding. It was this fun fight between friends, this goodbye fight that was going over their greatest hits, like literally in terms of like all the moves and forms we've seen, but also their combos. And it was really unique and fun to watch, and it really emotionally tied into that theme of overcoming our demons. Iki dealt with his the healthiest as he worked with it through the whole series, and then he finally let it go. And then they showed at the end when he kind of had like a Vice mannerism that even though he let it go, it's always with him. And I thought that was extremely well done. Now, before I get to the comments, and I'll probably be bringing up some of my stuff in the comments, I did want to touch on the characters a little bit, and also this is a more complete series review because I didn't watch every single post-series special or side story, but I watched most of them, and I wanted to offer brief thoughts on them. But first, just to touch on the characters really like lightning fast, I liked Iki fine. I think that unfortunately that most main writer characters are cut from the same cloth and feel just slight variations of each other, but I felt he was harmless. He never really annoyed me. He didn't feel like annoying like Gotchard currently does, where it feels like a gimmick. It felt more grounded. I felt he was mostly harmless, and I didn't hate or love him. He was just kind of there, and I liked him for what he was. I do feel like his character was almost a commentary on, like, calling him a busybody was meant to be a commentary on all the modern writers being like that, much like I feel that Vale was meant to be a tribute to the original Kamen Rider with his storyline, but maybe I was reading too much into it. I really did like the Evil Live story. I'll be honest, I liked his story more than his character. I think his performance and the way he acted got on my nerves, but I did like, he had some of the strongest themes, I think, about, like, you know, not ignoring your demons and dealing with them. I think Sakura was probably my favorite because I found her to be kind of similar in a way to a dynamic who was a Valkyrie from 01, where you kind of had these two extreme opinions with Vulcan and 01, and she was kind of the middle ground, and I always felt like she was the voice of reason between the brothers. I feel, unfortunately, much of her storyline was taken up by being about Aguilera, and it wasn't until the end you really addressed that her story was about insecurity, and I wish she would have gotten more time for herself, but I really liked her. I also really liked Demons. I felt like he kind of reminded me of like Buster in the sense that he was just a good guy character you wanted around. Not like a good guy doll, you don't want one of those around. And he got more in like his little side special, which I think was really nice and touching, and I like that they made time to expand on that if you're interested in checking that out. But I thought he was a good presence, and he felt like you probably could have trimmed his character, but I think he was a valuable character to have around in the series. I did like George's character, even though he, kind of got weird pacing for his story. I really wish they would have addressed his obsession with Ryder. I was glad the anniversary elements weren't intrusive, but I was always waiting for them to address it. I know that weirdly they originally wanted the series to be in a continuity where Ryder was a show, and then they changed their mind so they could facilitate crossovers. But I'm like, you guys don't give a fork about the continuity anyway. What does it matter? So I kind of like the idea that maybe in this world, like the Legends of Vale created again, this is my headcanon for just nonsense, that the Legends of Kamen Rider Vale spawned the creation of the Kamen Rider show, and that's why he's a fan. But I liked him for what he was, but and I liked Aguilera's story. I thought that was well done. I liked the Dead Man's trio in general. People mentioned how they didn't like the show after the Dead Mans were done. And you know what? I thought they served their time well, and I'm glad we moved on from them. But I did like their characters and how they each got individual focus about how they ended up where they were. But the last character I wanted to touch on specifically was definitely Vale, the father, Igarashi. It was Genta, right? Was his name. Far and away, one of my favorite characters in all of Rider. The actor did such an amazing job playing a dorky, lovable dad at the beginning and then turning it on to be an absolute badass. And I know that they were foreshadowing very early on that there was something wrong and he was involved, but I didn't expect the way he was involved. And when he showed up, one of my favorite scenes in the series, maybe in all of Rider, is when he showed up as Vale, because it was so surprising and it was so badass. And the music that played, I don't think they ever used that theme again in the main series. It was like this, it reminded me of the Purge Sirens and also the Shape Hunts Allison from the Halloween 2018 soundtrack, if anyone knows what I'm talking about. Loved that scene. I'm very disappointed that I think it might have to do with actor availability, but after that, he just disappeared for a really long time. I think they had a really great resolution, and I loved his suit when he had his final fight with Vice, or not Vice, Vale, the Vale Demon. I love both their suits, and I love the final resolution of that. And I guess the suit incorporates different aspects of all of his kids, which is cool. But the resolution was great. Love the story. I wish he would have been in it more, and I wish they wouldn't have got rid of that great Vale suit for Over Demons. Over Demons felt over necessary. Now, before we get to the viewer comments, just some quick thoughts. I already touched on the Demon special. I thought it was a nice little way of sort of touching on Demon's story where the series didn't have time for it. There was that Revice movie, the very first one, which was basically just a tech demo of Revice. I did like that they set up the Iki picture stuff very early on, though. You have the main movie with Chimera and stuff, which was honestly your classic Rider movie, a mixed bag of good and bad. I really liked the main villain because he was Jiraiya from Kaku Ranger, which took me a minute. He was on the plane, I'm like, I know this dude, and then I'm like, oh my god. I feel like he could have been a cool villain to rotate into the series. Missed potential, but I liked him just because he was Jiraiya. I did hate that whole, Iki healed him so we could have a respectful fight. I hate that nonsense, but the worst part about that movie was how underused Chimera was. He got, a whole pre-movie special that, led up to it, and then he was basically an afterthought. I get the whole message of his character in that movie was vengeance isn't important, you need to help people, but he could have at least had one better fight with the main villain. It was such a waste of a build-up. I thought the Igarashi combo was pretty cool. It felt like something they would have done in the series. Also, admittedly, a bit weird merging with all your siblings. And I have to say that I'm really surprised that the mother never became a Rider. That seems like a cliche, but it's dude, everybody else did. How did she not get a Rider form? Gotta say, the Geats movie, I still haven't watched, the Tyson movie that I think he's in, but the Geats movie with the Ryuki Riders was better than I thought. I still wish they didn't shoehorn in Ryuki, and I still hate the idea of, because these have a similar theme, we have to have a crossover. But admittedly, a Geats Ryuki crossover movie could be cool because of the themes about the games both being about desire. And it gave me PTSD of the Dino team-up being shoehorned into a Go Busters movie. But it wasn't as bad as I thought. Shoehorned in, and I still wish it would have been a separate movie, but it wasn't as bad as I thought. It was nice seeing the Ryuki characters. I liked that they had some meaningful little scenes with them. You got to see Ren and Shinji together again. This is kind of more Geats leaning, but I just wanted to comment that I like that they didn't just go for the easy, oh, Shinji's going to interact with Geats. They had him interact with Keiwa because their characters were very similar. I really liked that. But in general, it was actually just kind of a fun movie to watch. They did a pretty good job of blending the two series together. Good interactions. I like that they didn't ruin the Revice ending. They dug it up just so you could have one last goodbye with Vice, have some fun with him, but he allowed him to keep his memories of him, which was a nice little final gift for Geats, and it, was a nice epilogue where it didn't spoil the whole overcoming your demons thing, but it was well done. I enjoyed myself. Now, the last couple things that I watched, I know there were some other ones with, I think John was in some specials, Sakura, but I didn't watch those. The last one I watched were the V-Cinemas. I will say the Demons Evil Live one, I liked the Demons part. Love his final form. I think that was a valuable continuation of his story about learning to value his life. I felt the Evil Live stuff was unnecessary. I think he could have been in it and give him the form for the merchandise or whatever, but I felt the conflict of him not trusting Evil was like forced. It felt like, okay, how do we dig this up so we can do a new form? I felt all the conclusion and closure I needed to that dynamic in the main series, and I just felt they should have maybe like mainly focused on demons and give him a new form. It's fine. I don't know. I felt that part wasn't necessary. I felt the Juga George one was really weird. I was actually kind of looking forward to that one because, again, his story was weirdly jumbled, and I think there was potential for a really cool storyline with him, really addressing all the stuff with his dad's demon in him, but this felt like a really weirdly, tonally unnecessary special, and just to give Ortega a rider form, and I thought it could have been so much better. I kind of hate that was the last thing I watched. I kind of wish I had watched either the Demons Evil Live special or the Geats movie last, but yeah, I didn't care for that so much. But now, let's read your comments. All right, time for a future version of me to read some comments. Starting off here, oh my god, we have a long name. Okay, MK Demi Godzilla Warrior. That wasn't as bad as I thought. It just seemed really overwhelming. Why the MK? You overwhelmed me. Anyway, I thought Revice was pretty great. I just love the idea that the main rider are two different riders. The interactions between the Igarashis and the demons were pretty great, and I loved Cov's cuteness and interactions with Sakura, as well as Vice's Deadpool-like antics. So the guessing about the Vice stamps and his relation with the rider being paired with it was kind of a wonder. Granted, the third act was kind of a drag overall. It really picked up once Kagero came back, which ironically was the end of the arc, basically. The movies are pretty good as well. So this kind of shares a lot of my thoughts with it. It is funny to bring up the Deadpool antics, because I was saying how, like, I actually really liked that at the beginning with Vice, and then I just kind of fell off liking Vice. Not like I all of a sudden hated him, it just wasn't as endearing. Anyway, so now we have Masked Dreiser X1750. Revice was okay, but it went downhill during the second half, where they crammed so many plot lines and none of them were executed well. Like, I agree, like, they definitely crammed in a lot. I wouldn't say they weren't entirely executed well. I think there was good bits in there. I think the main problem was just, like you said, they were crammed in there. I think that there was, like, bits of small, like, good execution, if that makes any sense, but they just needed to be stretched out. You know how it is? Next up is... Wait, hold on. Next up is Mailsun 97? I don't know why that seems hard for me. Anyway, I kept wanting to read it as Melon Sun. Anyway, it was decent enough, and fell into the old tropes with a weird story that didn't seem like it knew where it was going. The characters are also pretty bland, or at least they had a weirdly paced development. I wouldn't say necessarily they were bland, for sure. I think that the story knew where it was going, kind of. I think it had a couple different ideas. Like, I don't know. I don't think it seemed aimless. It just, again, the pacing seemed weird, for sure. Alright, now we have Secret Agent 1007. I really like Revice. The family dynamic is something I appreciated. As a kid, I always used to imagine what would happen if I got superpowers, so having that sort of setting with the family life really reminded me of that. Something about it being grounded like that makes it cool for the 50th anniversary, in my opinion. Alright, next up we have, Jacob Anthony, 1719. Revice was a great fun. Revice had a great run from episodes 1 to 30. That's because some wrong decisions and stuff kind of fell off. Pretty common for Kamen Rider. And for some reason the fan, it blew it out of proportion and acted like it was the worst thing. But it definitely picked up around 40th, which was actually good for Kamen Rider seasons. The characters were well written, excuse me. I loved Daiji's art too. I actually felt for the siblings whenever something bad happened. I just love the family dynamic in this one. Iki and Vice had some of the best dynamic in the franchise, but it definitely had a lot more potential. They should have focused more on Veil, which I agree with. I wish that story arc lasted longer. Ortega was missed potential, and Gif shouldn't have existed. I don't know if he shouldn't have existed. I think he kind of made the main plot work, because he was like the main big bad, but I don't think he needed more. In my opinion, the Revice hate was way too forced. It became a trend to hate on it because for whatever reason, people kept comparing it to Dawn Brothers. Most of the hate tweets I see are followed by Dawn Brothers praise. Like, I picked this one because fandom hate does get way blown out of proportion. It just kind of reminds me of how I hate how binary criticism for anything is now. It's either it's a masterpiece or every second of watching this makes my eyes bleed. Like, there's no room for nuanced criticism anymore. So I thought that was some really good points about that. Next up we have Shenanigans Brandit 8353. I don't know if anyone's going to get that Shenanigans Brandit reference. Overall, I very much enjoyed Iki as a main rider. He isn't amongst the most compelling, but really shines when paired with other family members, especially with Vice as a wacky and comedic as it often is, surprised me in a good way with emotional moments, with it actively saving the ending with those great 2 last episodes after that big hiccup that was the last 2 episodes just before. The aesthetic of the series hit my personal taste, whether it be oddly colored main rider or Marichi Cultist? I don't know what that is. Daichi was a bit of a disappointment as a secondary rider with elements of his arc happening too fast and too slow. Keiwa was kind of a bit of deja vu in that aspect. Sakura, as a second attempt at a female tertiary rider, was certainly a step up from the disappointment with Yaiba, Valkyrie. I didn't know Valkyrie's name was Yaiba. I mean, I'm sure I did at some point. I found her quite likable and endearing when she was given moments to shine. Definitely agree about Sakura. I think she was a step up, and then I think Naga was a further step up after that. I'm glad to see someone else enjoyed the last 2 episodes of that dynamic. I think especially the last episode is really unique. Superpower Geeks, shout out to you also for just always being in the comments and being one of the people I've seen here for a long time. Also, Spider-Vic, still here. Thanks, man. I mean, you didn't comment on this. I'm not judging you for not commenting on this, but I'm just happy to see Spider-Vic still around. Anyway, I loved Revice, but I felt things got muddled at the end. The 3 siblings was the best part. I enjoyed each of their relationships with their demons, even Daiji, although he was definitely the weakest of the 3. I liked demons getting passed around like Ixa. I did feel that villains were less interesting after Oteka was defeated. I enjoyed Aguilera's redemption. Kazuraki was awesome, but him randomly being a villain writer in the penultimate episode was just weird. But I did like the final ending with Vice sacrificing himself for Iki. The suit's really cool to me. Overall, 8 out of 10. Some really good points here and stuff. I don't think that last villain arc with, I think Kazuraki's George, right, was necessarily random. It just was rushed. I'm not trying to argue with it, but I'm just saying, I kept thinking about that, how it was so weird that was kind of shoehorned in there, but at the same time, the last time we focused on George, we had just found out, the stuff about his dad and his demon, and it would have felt weird if we didn't address it. But then they handled it so weird by shoehorning in this final arc and then putting the stuff with his demon in the movie, which was just kind of stupid. Okay, now we have Shade ZZ1585. The first half I thought was enjoyable. Typical Rider fun stuff. The second half is horrible, messy, and poorly written. What I really liked were the movies and specials, though. Kamen Rider Beyond Generations, which I still haven't seen yet, is one of my favorite Rider movies. Kamen Rider Veil and Gaga were honestly fantastic. The star of the cast was Hiromi the Goat, best character in the show for sure. I would definitely agree about the Veil special being really good. I think past me recorded that, but I think I remember mentioning that I liked that it didn't feel essential, but it really did enhance the experience if you actually watched it. Now this last one that I have is a bit long, so I might paraphrase and skim a little bit, but it will be up on the screen, so you'll be able to read the whole thing. From Crutter Butter XD. Kamen Rider Revice holds a very special place in my heart, as it was the first Rider series I watched after a year-long break watching Rider. It gave me a feeling of excitement watching that I haven't felt since Build. I caught up around the time when people were shirting on the show. I don't know if the YouTube's going to get mad at me for the cussing, but let's use some Good Place references, because Good Place is fun. Anyway, let's talk about the Good Place, with that ending, right? No, anyway, okay. So, while I see the shortcomings, I thoroughly enjoyed it from beginning to end. I'm also a sucker for a family-oriented show, so it immediately clicked for me. Iki became my favorite writer of all time, as he's just your everyday guy that wanted to help out his family and anyone that comes through his life. I really liked Vice too, and his sacrifice near the end, helping Iki come out of his shell and moving on and playing with family with his demon really made me like him as well, furthering the themes of the show, both accepting and letting go of your demons. Daiji is also a favorite of mine and my favorite suit in the entire show, wholly live, both for what it represents during the arc of the show and the overall looks. I also thought it was really cool finding out that Kagero wasn't some sort of generic villain like Veil, but more of an obstacle that Daiji needed to realize that Kagero was a necessary evil in order to fight and guide his sense of justice back on track. Sakura was also one of my favorites, just an overall pleasure to watch. I also really enjoyed the theme of family. Here is the show, took the concept and made a message towards families being unique, because each life has a different story to tell. I will say that the show could have been tighter and didn't introduce so many writers near the end. Characters like Aguilera, Julio, and Hikaru? Who the hell is that? Is that over demons? I don't know. I liked being supporting, but unnecessary making them writers. As it made the show more clunky near the end. Also, George at the end becoming an antagonist rubbed me the wrong way, as it felt more it came out of nowhere than having good build-up. This just cracked my top 5 and currently my favorite Ryu season. I picked this one. It was a very good comment. I feel like it just really echoed a lot of my similar thoughts, and it was nice to see someone else appreciate, which I think was the 2 best things about the show. Pacing, clunkiness or whatever set aside, I think it really nailed the themes of family and overcoming your demons, and was very surprisingly deep. So, yeah. That is it for the viewer comments. I want to thank you guys again, everyone that participated. Again, I apologize that I can't read everyone's, but final verdict time. Revice was a very imperfect series, but I really enjoyed myself a lot. Quite honestly, it took me a while to get back in the groove, because part of the reason I wasn't watching it was because even though it was good and it wasn't doing anything wrong, it felt very formulaic and I was just kind of over it. And Geats was so different, it took me a minute to get back in lockstep with the series, but once I did, I really enjoyed myself. Full of a lot of little issues, a bloated cast, and like I said, that weird stop-start. But none of those stories, like I said, ever felt like they were unnecessary or forced. It just felt like the delivery was jumbled. And at the end of the day, I found it to be a mixed but really cool series filled with a lot of memorable themes and characters, and I really enjoyed myself. I just came away with some all-time favorite characters like Veil, and I really thought it was one of my probably top 5 favorite themes about getting over your demons that was really meaningful and had some really good lessons in there. So, a mixed bag, but I had a good time. But that's it for this one, guys. Thank you for watching. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell so you get notifications for my videos. Dawson Rider, signing out.